The universe does not have a single fixed history. Its past depends on the questions we ask in the present. If we sit with that for a second, the universe does not have a single fixed history. And then we just apply that to ourselves, because as below, so above, right? That means we don't have a single fixed history. And if from the perspective of being an interdimensional eternal being of pure consciousness, that makes a lot of sense. We're constantly experiencing, integrating, expanding, experiencing, integrating, expanding. At the end of the day, the things that you seek to do, be, experience. If time doesn't exist, that also means it's already done. It's already all happened. We just are not yet perceiving. Welcome to Soul Pod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings. So excited to be in conversation with you today. Today we're getting deep into the concept of time. So no big deal. We're going to get esoteric, scientific, and spiritual, as we always do. And welcome to the conversation. We got Kat with us again here today.
Hello. Excited to be here.
Yeah, this will be a fun one. So, the reason I wanted to do an episode on time is because it's such a challenging concept for us to wrap our human minds about. And we don't usually take a moment or a beat to really think about it because it's so inherent to how we experience this reality. And we'll talk about whether it's foundational or not, but it's something that also on your spiritual journey, you inevitably come up against time and you start to develop a new relationship to it through your consciousness. So it's very material and I think relevant to the spiritual journey. And there's a lot to cover here, but we'll see where the conversation takes us.
We will.
So I think to start here, I would love to talk about whether time is foundational or not. Now, that can be a loaded question because we could frame it in different ways that kind of lead to different outputs. But for the purposes of our conversation today, this brings us to an even larger conversation, maybe to start, which is a cosmological conversation, because inevitably time is a universal conversation because it's a core component of our existence. And it goes all the way back to the Big Bang. And I just finished reading this book by Thomas Hertog, who was Stephen Hawking's research partner, philosophical, cosmological partner. And so they worked together for many, many years. And in the book, he outlines this long and winding relationship to time. And what struck me so much about it was how much it changed over time, their opinion of it, and ultimately where they landed together before Hawking died. And one of those conversations is about whether time is foundational or not. And it brings us to this concept of top-down or bottoms-up cosmology. And again, this is my best understanding here. It took me a year to read this book because it's very dense. But so cosmologists, quantum physicists don't come for me. Or if you want to, come on the show. But my understanding of it is that for the last hundreds of years, at least, we've had a very bottoms-up approach to the universe, which is that everything kind of existed. These parameters, these laws of the universe existed, and we were birthed into these laws. And that means they're foundational, right? They existed and then we experience them. And that seems to be very comfortable for the analytical mind and the logical mind and the linear mind. It's yeah, that makes sense. There's parameters, there's laws, and we experience reality within those parameters, within those laws.
Like we just came here and it already existed.
Exactly. Yeah. That its existence had nothing really to do with us.
Right. With or without us, the physics that maintains this universe like remains the same. Time remains the same.
Exactly. Yeah. And another way to think about this that I really resonated with coming from the science world is, in science class, we would have like a petri dish and we would set these experimental parameters, these knowns, and we were trying to isolate an outcome and trying to make sure as many of the knowns were known so that we could deduce where that outcome was coming from. And this is another really good example, is that we were taking ourselves out of the equation. We were looking down into the petri dish. And so much of our lives are kind of structured, it seems to be from the analytical linear mind, in that way. That we can separate ourselves enough from an experience to try and determine the core fundamental reality. And one thing from reading the book that was quite clear, especially from quantum physicists and cosmologists, is that you cannot, at the end of the day, seemingly extract ourselves from that equation. As much as we maybe can in very specific scenarios, like the Petri dish scenario, but that doesn't extrapolate to reality as we know it, if that makes sense.
Or like, it does. And that for, as you're saying, like in an experiment where we're dissecting a frog, we all did that one. We can clearly see like that is over there. We are over here. They're separate. But for a concept like time that is interdimensional to our, right? Like interdimensional to our existence, we can't exclude us as a variable in that.
You can't extract the fact that there's consciousness in that equation, that there's perception in that equation, that we like to think we are. We really like to think that. But the reality is that you can't separate the two. And we know this from the small world, the quantum mechanical world, where measurement shifts how something manifests. So really, this is all kind of heady, but we're doing our best to just kind of like stretch you a little bit when it comes to this idea of time. And that brings us to the other approach, which is top-down cosmology. And this is where Hertog and Hawking spent a lot of time. And it's a complete reversal from where Stephen Hawking started at the beginning of his career, which I find fascinating. Like how powerful that he came out in favor of one philosophy, and by the end of his life, he had completely done a 180 on it. And I find that really admirable, actually, because he gave himself permission to change and shift and learn. And I think that's such a lesson. That's a whole nother conversation, but it's such a lesson for all of us to like remain malleable to changes. And he's remaining malleable to like the largest of implications of, time. I mean, you can see how somebody could get really wrapped up in their opinions on some of these philosophies and theories, because you start to build your entire worldview from it. So to be able to deconstruct that, I think, is absolutely fascinating. But ultimately, and there's so much on this in the book that is very intricately laid out that I'm not going to get into today, but because I can't. But the top-down cosmology of a quantum universe is where they landed at the end of the day. And so there's a lot in that one phrase, top-down cosmology and quantum universe. So it seems to be a given that we live in a quantum universe, even though most of what we understand about the quantum right now is at the micro scale, the atomic scale. We're starting to understand how it applies to the macro scale. But this is basically the theory, interestingly, not of everything, because Stephen Hawking that was his quest, was to discover a theory of everything. And ultimately, his final theory is that there likely is not a theory of everything. I know, fascinating. Because from a top-down cosmological perspective, there couldn't be, because it's an emergent universe. So even the laws are emerging through what they call interaction, You could say observation and how consciousness plays a role in that. We're still discovering, but that there is a universal wave function. So they were actually a little anti, or a lot anti, the multiverse idea. They think that it's a universal wave function and that there are emergent laws through our experience. Now, what does that mean? That means that we weren't birthed into a universe that contained us, and that we experience these laws on kind of the outside of us, that we're within them. We were birthed into a universe that found its way into being through interaction and a collapse of the universal wave function for different reasons in different ways. The idea being that instead of something happening and that possibility needing to be funneled into a parallel alternate universe, instead it's all contained within this universe, and those possibilities are finding the highest amount of coherence within our reality instead of moving outside of it. That's the best way I can explain it. So it means that all of those possibilities are kind of existing. One is becoming more and more coherent based on interaction or observation.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And again, there's probably others that can explain that better. The multiverse collapses in their philosophical exploration, their theoretical explanation, based on this top-down cosmology and quantum universe and the boundary conditions that contain the universe. And specifically in relation to time, the way I understand it, is that it is emergent as well, which is really, really trippy. So we do know that time is a dimension, and our minds, if we think about like, why do we experience time? It's because we have the lens of the mind, ultimately. It's because of us. Ultimately, that's why time exists. It's not outside of us, through us. It's because of us. That's why when you go into like a spiritual experience and you get outside of yourself, your consciousness goes more and more into, you could call it the universal wave function or the wave function. I'm on the fence. I'm not quite sure about the multiverse versus not. But nonetheless, if you expand your consciousness, you inevitably find a different relationship to time, and also can travel along the spectrum of time ultimately at will. And there's many people that have talked about this. So it's because of our minds and the ways that we're perceiving reality that time exists in the way that it does. So you can't really take the observation or the interaction out of the equation. And they agree with us from what I can understand. And so what's really interesting about this, if we first focus on the past, so this is where a lot of their effort was also spent. Not as much on the future, but they both operate the same way. But it's easier for us to look at the past because there's certain things that we can call measurable, like background radiation. And how does this all come to be? Interestingly, I won't get into like the physics of it. Ultimately, what they came to the conclusion of is that the past is just as much created as the future is from the present moment.
Oof, yeah. That's a mind bender. Okay, so then for
Yeah.
somebody who's listening, it feels like the obvious, question is then is the past, like, can we change the past in the present moment?
Oh, puppy. Yeah, I
Is
mean,
the past rigid? Is it
mm,
already, because to anyone who has a memory or anyone who's experienced trauma, they're like,
mhm.
that's real, that happened, that's a moment in time, that's the past. And to think that the past is as impacted by the present moment as the future, that opens a lot of possibility in how we relate to whatever that memory is.
Yeah, it's very trippy. And again,
Hmm.
I'm not saying I have all the answers here, but from what I understand and have experienced, it's not that the past doesn't exist. Like it exists because it's been observed. And your
Mm.
observation point, we have to remember, is always the present moment.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like that's where everything is happening. The past is imaginative from the perspective of the present moment.
Mm.
So what they're saying is that yes, it happened and there's a certain coherence, to the past, right? But a lot of it can be because we are observing it from the present moment. So if we go really zoomed out to kind of get out of any human level biases and, like you mentioned, trauma, that starts to get really prickly, right? Because we have an emotion charged around it. But if you zoom way out to the cosmological perspective, that means that as we become aware or interact with elements of the universe, the past is being created through that. I'm just saying what they said.
Like, I'm just a messenger. Okay.
So you can try and stretch that possibility, that theory. Remember, this is theoretical, as far as you'd like to. I think it's really interesting to think, and it makes a lot of sense from a certain perspective, if you truly believe in presence, that this moment is the only moment that we ever have. Then, as much as we are focusing on creating our future, which is always, that's why we do so much work on identifying what it is that you want to feel in your future and feeling it now, because this is where you create from. There could be a powerful possibility that I don't think we have really tried on yet to create our past. And I do understand, don't get me wrong, I get that that can get into some slippery territory. And based on this theory, and go read it for yourself, this really makes you think about how you relate to the past.
Yeah, because it makes me wonder because in presence, we experience this when we drop into meditation, where that experience of everything existing in the now is real. It's the experience. And what we're talking about, at least that anyone who's experienced that, you might know what we're talking about, that feeling, but how we relate to the past in that state, in that dropped in, our brains are in a theta state, let's say, in that dropped in place, how we relate to the past. We're not recreating it per se. We're not negating what we may have experienced or what we may have observed at one point in our relation to that moment in time. But in that moment, the way we relate to the past plays with how we relate to the future, is how I'm interpreting it. It's like our ability to create the future is just as what's the word, like, impacted by our ability to interact with the past, because it's all now. Is
Yeah.
that a fair
And I mean, I
interpretation?
think totally. And I think I know this is a stretch, because even that concept of there really not being a past or a present, but just a now, that's a big stretch for the analytical mind. But it's a truth. That's like a foundational truth. And you can start to think of time less and less as like a stream that we're in, and it just kind of carries you along, and more is like a circle. And it's not linear. And the reason that we think that it is because that seems to be how the mind is trying to orient this reality. Time is a method of orientation for the mind.
Helps us make sense of.
Right.
And also, like, I feel like everybody's heard or has maybe even said, like, time is a construct, but which is exactly what we're pointing to. But at the same time, it creates the perimeter so that we can exist in our day-to-day life. It's similar to the ego. It's like,
Totally.
we need the ego.
We need it. We need
because
time.
It helps us interact with the world. It helps me go into a coffee shop and say, my name is Kat. Can I, order this? The same way that time is necessary so that we can, exist in this world and say it's January in 2026 and create some sort of perspective around this experience.
I love that you mentioned the ego, because it's totally relevant to the conversation around time. Because the ego is a method by which the self orients to self and other. And that also means that there has to be space, which means there has to be time, as far as the ego is concerned. And so when we start to move beyond time, the ego can't, in the core of it at least, can't come with us. So that's why the ego is not super stoked about this concept.
Yeah, that's why the ego is like, turn this podcast off.
Yeah, it's not going to like it. If you feel prickly, that may be why.
Because it's the ultimate untethering of
Yeah.
from self, if we truly, you know, believe in it's all now in presence, it's all now, then foundational to that has to be a complete untethering of the ego, which is
Yeah.
everything we fight against.
Totally. So I think that's really good to call out. And there's Hertog said this in his book. He said the universe doesn't have a single fixed history. So I just want to sit with that phrase for a moment. The universe does not have a single fixed history. Its past depends on the questions we ask in the present. This is straight from that book. Right? So if we sit with that for a second, the universe does not have a single fixed history. And then we just apply that to ourselves because as below, so above, right? That means we don't have a single fixed history. And if, from the perspective of being an interdimensional eternal being of pure consciousness, that makes a lot of sense. We're constantly experiencing, integrating, expanding, experiencing, integrating, expanding. And this is all happening now. Like it's already done. This is another thing I've been sitting with in my meditation, is like, it's all already done. At the end of the day, the things that you seek to do, be, experience. If time doesn't exist, that also means it's already done. It's already all happened. We just are not yet perceiving. We're only perceiving a very focused component of ourselves. And that's limited by time in this human incarnation. So there's not a single fixed history, and it depends on the questions that we ask from the present moment, which another way to say that is it depends on our awareness from the orientation of the present moment, which is the only thing that exists.
Yeah. And what that brings up in me is such an empowered choice. Like you're at a crossroads there where I think so many of us feel like, and again, if we're zooming this back into our human experience and how it pertains to really this practice of meditation and practicing presence, so many of us believe that we do have a fixed history and then that history defines us. And so even just hearing you say that, I can feel so many people angry at, well, no, I do. And that's why I'm this way. And in a way, like, how dare you tell me that I don't, And so
I'm daring to tell you.
Yeah. And so I feel like it drops you into a crossroads where you have the choice to continue to remain hooked into that belief that you do have a fixed history, or explore the possibility that Crystal's offering to us here, which is that perhaps in this moment, in presence, you're able to integrate, evolve, expand, like all at the same time, and allow for whatever your perception of that fixed history is to, like, what's the word? Shapeshift into something else, into something that is true in this present moment.
Yeah, this is all an exploration. That's what philosophy and these theories are really great for, is to expose ourselves to different orientations and to try it on. And sometimes it is going to be counterintuitive. And so much of our big breakthroughs have been counterintuitive. Quantum mechanics as a whole is very hard for the linear mind to make sense of, and any quantum physicist will tell you that. I can't remember who said this, but he said, if you're not confused by quantum mechanics, you don't yet understand it well enough. So this is the realm that, it's always an offering, it's always an invitation. Try it on, see what you think ultimately. And I'll also give you a personal example where time got very trippy for me. So when I was super sick, and I've maybe talked about this a little bit before, time got very, not compressed. Time opened up in a new way when I was really ill. And I was experiencing simultaneous lives at one time. Like I was experiencing this lifetime, I was experiencing components of other lifetimes. And that's a whole nother conversation about how I think as you get further in the spiritual journey, because time is a construct, all of these lifetimes start to become known and integrated. And there was one lifetime in particular where there was a great deal of suffering happening. And for some reason that I still don't entirely understand, this experience I was going through was connected to that experience in that other space and time. And as I spiritually connected with this incarnation and felt his pain and his loss and his sadness and his like self-betrayal, and I was sitting with that at the same time that I was sitting with my own challenges, right? Physically, mentally, spiritually. And it was such a cauldron of intensity. But as I moved through and healed and did a lot of deep spiritual work, that lifetime shifted. I don't know if I rewrote it from this dimension or what happened, but eventually I was seeing that lifetime shift. He became different. He had a different story. And the very last time that I still get chills, the very last time that I saw him was from above looking down, and he was joyful and he was resolved. It didn't mean that like the bad things didn't happen, but it meant that it was integrated in a different way that led him to fulfillment, to led him to somewhere that was lighter than what I had originally seen. So that's really hard to wrap your mind around. But the thing about spiritual experience and work like that is you feel it more than anything. I mean, you can see it and all that, but the release, his release was my release.
And I'm curious from your perspective, even in that experience, do you feel like if these are simultaneous lives, as we're pointing to, that the consciousness that is that iteration of your spirit also may be or has the potential to, in the same way, look at an impact in this timeline?
100%. I have another story for that.
Perfect. We did not plan that.
So here's what's trippy about this. How can I know if I have created for my future this present moment, right? Because again, the aperture of our consciousness, for the most part, unless you're actively opening it in meditation, is constricted. And so here's another thing I'll just throw out there for you, is your future could be creating your present, right? So when I was in a long meditation, again, this is, I think, something I talked about before, but I astral traveled to a moment where I was super sick on this patio. And I've astral traveled to a few other times in my past from the perspective of now. And I was in the presence of a different version of myself, a different version in space and time. But there was a communication from future me to past me, whether that's healing, the presence of being in the presence of my future self. I felt it in my past. I experienced it from my past. And then I experienced it from my future, going back into my past. So I received it and experienced it from two different perspectives, which co-created my life in a way that was deeply impactful. Wow. So it's all happening now. So that's made me personally, very curious. I'm like, wait a second, is like, I have an awareness of my future much more so than I have before. But really, it's an awareness, it's a circular awareness of myself that I'm simply becoming more perceptive to. I know that's really hard to put words to.
It is. Yeah. I mean, you're doing a good job. I think this whole conversation is very difficult to clearly try to, like ground into a way that is practical and whatever. But I mean, I've had multiple meditations, and I feel like as I get deeper in my meditation journey, I don't like to use the word advanced because I'm like, compared to what? But as I get deeper in my meditation journey, where I'll be a drop into meditation, and I don't know if I've ever categorized it as astral travel, but it's more so I so clearly connect with that future version of self. And it's not so much in the way of like visualizing and feeling. It's like I am witnessing this already existing to the point where it ripples back in time to this present moment and changes my state to the point where it inevitably changes the present moment and everything that's created from there.
Yes. Yeah. That's beautifully put. That's kind of what I was trying to say, but you said it a lot better. Yeah.
Okay.
The ripple effect is real because you're interacting instead of you being on that stream that's just, past, future, present, past, future, present. You're now starting to get connective points that already They already exist. You're just becoming aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ripples, I truly believe this, ripples into your present moment and across your entire experience in the universe. So there's something very interesting happening there, that we may not fully understand until we are fully free of the perspective of this human form. And that's okay, but it's fun to try.
As soon as we leave this human form, we're gonna be like, oh, it's all so
Yeah,
clear.
it's so,
You know,
I really
so
do think,
obvious.
yeah, it'll be very obvious how it all works. You know, in Hawking, he said that the universe doesn't run forward. This is again to the stream idea from a fixed beginning. It's shaped backward from present conditions. So it's kind of another way to frame up what we've been talking about. The universe doesn't run forward from a fixed beginning. It's shaped backward from present conditions.
Wow. Leave it to Stephen Hawking. Just
Right?
nails it. Yeah. Just drops
Yeah.
a bomb of like, think on that for the couple years.
Yeah. Yeah. That'll keep him busy for the next decade.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and just, I find him very interesting. And one thing that Hertog says at the very end of the book is that, Hawking was as confined as a human being could be, completely devoid of all control, so much taken away from him physically, only left with his mind. And I've heard this from multiple people who had interacted with him. He was also the most free person that they had ever met. And I find that really, really interesting and inspiring that he was forced into an experience that most of us, hopefully will not experience, but there's a gift in it too, because it enabled him to reach this freedom of mind that is probably quite unique and powerful. But we can also talk about here the retrocausality experiments that have recently come out. So if you've missed this, I will do my best to fill you in on them. So this was an experiment that was done a couple months ago, I believe this came out. And they're measuring particles as they transverse through long sections of piping. And so these two entangled particles had different lengths of tubing that they were sent through. So one was long, a delayed system. It would be measured later in time, and then the other would be measured earlier in time. It's a system. So we think of those we like to think of the two particles as like separate things, but they're entangled. So now it's better to think of it as a system.
Okay, so then bring that into a real life practical scenario that we can think about, if you
You
can.
can think of it as almost like a reorganization of experience. So you have an insight in the present moment. Something, the dots connect. You have a realization. You have a breakthrough of understanding or experience. And suddenly the past seems to shift. It is almost like a reorganization of experience. I'm speaking broadly here, but that's kind of how I think of it, is that, my past with somebody that I interacted with is going to be different in my mind than that of the person who also experienced that experience, because it's all from the state of mind. My observation of that experience is constantly creating that experience, reorganizing that experience from the present moment. So I think if we were to expand that even more, I think this is where radical healing can happen, where all of a sudden something is healed. And I think it can happen through a variety of means, but one of them is through a reorganization of experience from the future, potentially, or across time in some ways. And it all shifts what's true in the now. Because if it's all happening, it's all already happened, then that potential exists.
Yeah. And in that example, you and the person you interacted with are the two entangled particles. So a shift in your perception of the interaction or the past in this case, wouldn't it in theory also shift the person you've interacted with, their perception of?
It could. It totally could. I mean, I've definitely done clearing energetic work that I think other people have felt or experienced or picked up on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a similar thing that's happening is, again, we're all connected. So we know that we know this is true on some level, right? But I think it could potentially, if we really wanted to stretch this theory, what if I shift something about that experience in my present and it starts to shift the other person's experience of the experience at the same time?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Possible.
Try it on, see how it
Yeah.
feels.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's not just I mean, in the science world, we talk about it as being selection, like that wave function collapse of the possibilities into a observable choice. This is why I think I'm getting a lot more about this lately. The power of choice is so important. And it's not just choice in the things you do, it's choice in the things you think, what you believe, the smallest things. I think we're, as a species, going to become way more attuned to how powerful that choice is, because that is a method of selection and observation. So it's not just, another way to think about it, it's really difficult to wrap the mind around, is the observation or the selection it's like building coherence in the past, because there could be a lot of different possibilities that exist. There probably are infinite. And so what we're doing, it's almost like when you're tuning an instrument and there's these possibilities and it's kind of waffling between many different ones. And then as we think, as we choose, same thing applies in the present moment and to the future. We are selecting that reality into our experience. So there's something very interesting around that.
Yeah, which is, I mean, just to kind of bring it back to even soul pod in a way, like that is the point of these practices. It's so that we can create that pause in our mind, create that moment in our mind where we can notice exactly what it is that we believe in the present moment, because everything extrapolates out from this present moment. The choice, it's easier said than done. It's easier to talk about than to truly be in that moment and choose what it is that you believe, or even notice what it is that you believe in that moment. That is the point of these practices, of meditation, of any stillness practice, so that you can start to, in any given moment, bring awareness to what choice you are making. Because as we've talked about, that choice affects everything we create.
I think it affects more than we're even aware of yet. So that's why, to your point, that's why this present moment work, it's always there. It's just how much of it are you allowing? How much of it are you a part of, rather than distracted by the mind?
Right.
So
how much are you willing to
willingness is big.
notice or willing to see, observe?
Yeah. So it's really the top down and bottoms up cosmology. The difference is in the observer. In one form, it's taking the observer out of it. It's just you're out of the equation. And there's the initial state, the Big Bang, and laws have evolved. You're born into them. And the present moment is just an output. This is really from like a bottoms up perspective. It's so utilitarian. It's like the present moment is just a thing, and we really want to be able to predict it. We want to be able, because our minds are geared towards prediction. So that's why even in the scientific community, it's a heated debate, because we want to be able to apply these parameters to an expected outcome. It's a natural human inclination. That's why this theory that they landed on is challenging for people to accept, although I think in spiritual experience it makes a lot of sense. And so the assumptions that are present in that bottoms up world is that everything is objective and fixed. And I think we're going to be really challenged on that as we move forward as a species. And it's very freeing and a little disconcerting at the same time with the top-down approach, in that it puts the observer or the interaction front and center. It not only reintroduces the observer into the equation, it makes it a core component of the equation. And so the cool thing about this, though, that for people who really want to get nerdy on it, that's also very cool, is that it still encapsulates some of the theories that we currently have. You know, it still encapsulates Darwinian evolution. But even as Darwin said, he thought one of the last things that he spoke about, his own theory, is that it would be a component within a broader universal experience. And I think he will be proven right, that evolution is very much measurable and can be applied. We look at it retrospectively, of course, but these laws, even Einstein's theory of relativity, it's still applicable, but it's within what we have created, what has emerged. And it's a way for us to measure and interact with what has emerged. It's not going to describe the larger universal design and components. So it's kind of cool that they can coexist because they're just certain like subcomponents that we're looking at that still exist and still make sense.
Yeah.
But it's all emergent, if that makes sense.
Yeah, we're not being asked to completely rewrite what we have experienced or know to be true, but it's more of a like, yes,
recontextualize it. Yeah.
Right. It's a exploration of how those theories evolve and as the universe evolves.
Yeah. So something to try on for today. And I know that we've stretched, and I've stretched this concept. And if anything, I hope it gives you a pause to think about more deeply where it is that you're placing your attention and your focus, and how important your choice is in any given moment through what you say, do, think, believe, feel. What are you choosing? And becoming hyper aware of that, because we know, regardless of this orientation towards time, that is deeply impactful for creating your experience. So it's really, the universe is more of a choose your own adventure book than maybe we thought.
Yeah, and I think for anybody that this conversation maybe piqued an interest or intrigue, when this podcast airs, I believe Sunday, the coming Sunday, so 2 days from when this airs, we are hosting a part 2 of our January series. So all about the creative body. Why don't you tell them a little bit more about that?
Yeah, good call. Yeah, we're doing one more free workshop. So our focus on this is going to be on your energetic system as a whole, with a focus on the creative body. And so the creative body is the aperture through which we observe our reality into this present moment. It's the way that we create what it is that we want. And that's done through feeling and getting clear on what it is that you want to feel in any given moment. What do you want to feel more of that you're not? And we don't take a lot of time to reorient around that. So this will give you some space and time to reorient around that. And to also remember how powerful you are as a creator. We also forget that in our day-to-day, that you are an incredibly powerful, interdimensional, eternal being. And how can we bring more of that into this dimension? Because when you do, you're going to be creating in ways that will blow your mind. So that's what this workshop will be about. And we also have a few spots left in our retreat, which will be in April in Joshua Tree. And we'll be going deep, deep, deep into this work, pushing your comfort zones a bit when it comes to meditation and exploration and contact with interdimensional consciousness as well. So join us.
Thanks so much, Crystal. You really led us through that one. We got online right before we started recording, and I was like, whoa, But thank you so much for guiding us through that.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sure there'll be questions and conversation, and I welcome
Yeah.
that. Drop it in the comments, and we can also go deeper into this maybe in another episode if that's what everyone wants. But thank you, Kat, for bearing with me and for helping me
No, I feel
try
like I
and
learned a
like
lot.
yeah, thank you for like grounding the conversation and bringing the philosophical into the true individual experience. So, thank you as well. All right, till next time, light beings. Thank you. Thank you for journeying with us today, Light Being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.